Today's project is the Mandalorian blaster pistol from the Mandalorian TV show. This was mostly printed out in white PLA on the Ender 3 with a 0.12 millimeter layer height. All the little fuzzies that I can't get with just sandpaper, I'm going to try hitting with a heat gun. Step 1 is to sand. Step 2 is to heat gun. Step 3 is to spray paint with primer. I took a minute to prime the pieces with a few good coats, sand them, prime them, sand them, do all that stuff. So these are the majority of the pieces all laid out. We have the body, we have the handle, we have the barrel, we have the upper, the lower, and then a bunch of little greeblies. Some of these pieces I already coated with some black spray paint, but I'm not a huge fan of the way the color was put down. And I think I might either sand it off and do a new color just by painting it on by hand, or I might see what happens if I just paint it directly on to the spray paint. Most of these pieces at least have a black undercoat, so I'm going to recoat everything except for the grips. I'm going to leave the grips alone. I'm going to recoat the parts that I think is necessary in another layer of a more stable black color. This spray paint that I used, I'm kind of worried about it chipping off and flaking in places. It's not the greatest quality, but it's what I had on hand. So the first step is to get a pretty big brush and just start going over all the pieces. Now that I've generally base coated all the pieces with a matte black finish, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start the glue up of the basic body. I'm going to rough up the points where they're glued together so it gives the glue a bit more of a tooth, a bit more of a grit to adhere the pieces together properly. I'm using 60 grit sandpaper just to rough up the edge. Alright, so I've roughed up the top of this handle piece, and the first step is this. This is the piece that holds the barrel in place. It's ever so slightly offset. I'm going to be using Loctite. It's got a good ratio of strength to work time. Because it's so small, I don't imagine this piece being under a lot of stress. So I'm not too worried about needing something higher power, something stronger like Gorilla Glue to hold these seams together. There we go. Now this piece gets lined up. I'm using this other piece, which will be put on next, as a guide to figure out how this piece goes. So with this piece lined up, position for the barrel holder becomes more obvious. While we're at it, let's go ahead and glue on the front section just so we can keep it as a guide for the barrel holder. Oh no! Alright, so the next step in the glue up is putting on the piece that holds the barrel in place. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put down a nice generous stripe of super glue. And then slot it into place. I'm also going to go ahead and take the time to attach the barrel. It largely seems like a pressure fit, but just to be safe, I'm going to put a ring of super glue around the edge. So I've removed some of the paint on the section of the barrel that couples into the receiver, help give it some more tooth. The next part is to do all the little greeblies and the little attachments, the little detail parts. Now, a majority of these are gunmetal gray. Some of these have little silver accents, and then they all have some edge weathering. Also, some of these pieces aren't gunmetal gray, such as the barrel and the cleaning rod. While those pieces are drying, I can start working on the other pieces, like the cleaning rod and the fire selector and the cleaning rod bracket. So what I plan to do with these pieces is use some of this gold enamel that I have. So I'm going to try that to give these pieces a little extra pop. I don't usually use enamel too much because it's just so smelly, but I'm going to try it with these. It's also expensive. Not incredibly expensive, but just comparatively expensive for how much you get for how little's in the bottle. I'm going to be using this raft piece as a palette. On this ridge part, I'm only painting the high spots because I'll go back later and hit the low spots with a darker color. That way, the shadows and the ridges are more visible. Now I'm going to let that piece dry and start in on the bracket and the fire selector. And finally, putting the little detail on the trigger. So I have several options when it comes to edge weathering, but the two that I'm going to try today are silver rub and buff and just silver Sharpie. Now I have more control with just the Sharpie, but the color and the end result of the rub and buff is much stronger. So I'm going to see what I can do with each one. Some sections will be rub and buffed, some sections will be silver Sharpied. I might try dry brushing some sections with just silver paint, but let's see how this goes. So I'm going to try the rub and buff first, just a couple major sections like this top rail. That's pretty good. And then some on section that goes on the grip. Now I'm going to try edge weathering with the silver Sharpie on this piece. This piece attaches to the side of the sight. And as you can see, I have a lot more control over it, but it's a lot less visible. The interior ring of the hammer is silver. Now these little greeblies go on the side of the lower receiver. And finally is this piece. This is the flash hider. What I'm going to do with this one is, because it's all silver, I'm just going to use some silver paint and just paint the front. And I'm not going to be too picky with keeping that line clean, because I think what it is the in-universe explanation is the whole thing is silver, but the front has just gotten charred and blackened by the heat of use. So now I gotta do some edge weathering on the actual piece itself. Tried the dry brushing. Alright, so the next step is a glue up. So what I'm going to do now is just get it to a small stripe on the top, and there goes the top rail. So while the top rail is still gluing down, I'm going to start on some of the greeblies that I can access from this side. So, namely, these little bolts. This first one goes right here. This one goes directly below this line. There we go. What I'm going to do next is the hammer. Apply glue to here and to there. Alright, so that's going to sit tight for a bit. But it takes some of this watered down paint and just brush it along the surface of the cleaning rod, just dull the shine just a little bit. And then wipe it off. Dot the bar and then run the mounting bracket down the side just to tack that in place. And then the majority of it should be held in place with the actual bracket. Alright, and the final step for this side is the fire selector. I'm going to tack the fire selector with 2 dots. And from what I can tell with the reference images, this goes the same level as the cleaning rod and curve down slightly. So the last things that need to happen are paint up the grips and glue them on, and this piece, and then pressure fit the barrel, which can be done that. So mixing burnt umber, golden brown, and a little bit of black. Basically, this is the palette I'm going to be working with for the grip section. Now, the main color of the grip is this deep brown, but it's not all deep brown because it's some kind of wood. It changes colors throughout, so I'm going to kind of do try to aim for a wood effect. Just taking a little bit of the combination of the 3, I'm going to try to do a wash with this alternate wooden color. Trying to keep the brush strokes all the same direction so that it gives off an illusion of wood grain. Lastly, the glue up. Just giving each side 1 stripe. Make sure that they're all lined up correctly. Followed by a little dot and a tiny stripe on the bottom of the grip. Alright, now we let that glue up and we call that a day.